Hi everyone, thank you for coming to Sutton's inaugural, or at least in this century, inaugural candidate forum. Thank you for sitting with us. I talk a lot, so I wrote things down to say, and I'm going to try to keep it short. First of all, I want to say thank you to our candidates who have come. It takes a lot of courage to come up here, and I really appreciate it. I think we all do. And I want to thank everybody who came out too on a rainy Tuesday night. It's so hard to go anywhere, so I appreciate you taking the time. And also to our viewers who will be watching this online or at one of the Sutton channels later, thank you for taking the time to watch it. Just a little bit of background on what we're doing here. Last year, when I went to research candidates in town, I found it really hard to find any information. Even who's running it all, I have to go and navigate to the website. Saw people posting on social media, and it can be a little bit polished or superficial, and so it made it hard to really evaluate what people are about. And I've heard from talking to my neighbors, a lot of people have had this, so from that predicament, this forum was born. We, Sutton as a town, we face a lot of change, whether we like it or not. And we're kind of past the point of doing things and hoping it works out. And you hear people say, let's do this, or let's be this. But how? A lot of us agree on what we should or shouldn't be, but how is really the question. And the buzzwords and the catchphrases, they're not gonna fix our roads, they're not gonna build our libraries. So we wanted every candidate out there to come here and tell us not just what they envision, that is important, but also how. Because we're a complicated community, we're a growing community, we're charging new territory on all kinds of fronts here, in terms of how we're growing and who our community is made up of and all that. So how is the question? And just trying to understand these challenges as our population grows, development digs in, our infrastructure strains to respond to that. So that's, sorry, my printout got messed up. Scroll. That's kind of what we're doing here. I've gotten some feedback. I just wanted to make a quick note on the partisanship. Yes, this forum shouldn't be run by a partisan group. I agree. And we hope that somebody will step up and partner with us next year, or maybe the town will take it over. But why are we here? Because no one else was doing it, and we think it's essential. We have gone through pains to be transparent, to be professional, to be fair to every candidate here. All of our candidates had the questions about a week in advance. They were also posted online. Any changes that were made were immediately shared with everybody. We listened to feedback. We talked to people from town, both citizens, people who work for the town. We really wanted to just try to get a sense of what's important and how we can at least start to have this conversation. Because like I said, these issues are coming for us. They're not always that interesting, really, but, and we don't want to be in a position where we're looking at them after the fact or commenting on social media when we could have actually been a part of the process. So that's what we're trying to do here. On a personal note, I was texting with one of the candidates at 5:30 a.m. I won't say who, a very wonderful person. And I was like, what are we both doing up at 5:30? And my daughter came in and she said, Mommy, I need you more than they do. So believe me, I don't want to be doing this, but I'm doing it for my kids and for my community that I live in and I'm invested in now, along with my many great colleagues who have helped me do this. It's not me at all, by the way. I'm just saying me. It's a great group of people who helped us. And just really quickly, what is a DTC? The Sutton Democratic Town Committee is newly revived. Every town in Massachusetts can have both a Republican and a Democratic Town Committee. They are official bodies recognized by the state, and once they're formed every 4 years, officers and members end up on the presidential primary election. So technically, I am an elected official, and as are all of our members, which is weird. The existence of the town committee, the purpose is really to help find and support candidates to build community on both sides, Republican or Democratic, and there is a Republican town committee that's been here for quite some time that exists that you can reach out to and, you know, participate with as they do events. I'm not sure what their events are. But we restarted after a long presence there was no Democratic presence here, so for over a decade. So we're here, we're trying to bring some balance into the conversation and to kind of try to unite the community a little bit as we can. Everybody's welcome, you don't have to be a Democrat to join us. Anyhow, I hope that you find our questions are fair. I think Beth has a basket where people can put questions in. If you have something, if we get to them, at Paul's discretion, we'll maybe do a couple of questions for the candidates on the fly, but we have kind of a lot for you guys to talk about. So without further ado, I want to introduce Paul, known as the Town Crier, who finds a way to post very frequently without comment on the Sutton site, which I think unto itself is quite a feat. He is doing our moderation, he's in charge. I'm handing over the mic. Paul moved to Sutton in 2022. He was the president of Waters, or are you currently the president of Waters? Yeah. And the treasurer of the Sutton Cultural Society, member of the First Congregational Church, the historic church here in Sutton. He works with the Boy Scouts. He is a Vietnam veteran, U.S. Marine Corps. Thank you for your service, sir. And he's been in Sutton since 2002, and is the retired director of finance and operations for the school business administration. So if I got everything correct, sir, I'm going to hand it off to him. And we do have, just so that you know, all the candidates who are on the ballot were invited. They all were given the questions. Some have declined to come with scheduling issues or whatnot. Every candidate was also offered the opportunity, if they couldn't make it, because our schedule, we didn't have a lot of flexibility due to the demand here for this room. So some people couldn't make it. Anybody who couldn't make it was offered to do video responses, and I offered to also help them do that. So we do have one candidate who did do video responses. So bear with us as we put those up on the screen. And without further ado, I'll hand this off to Paul and you guys.
Thank you, Jen. Everybody hear me okay? So to get us started, welcome. But please let's stand and let's do the Pledge of Allegiance together. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. So I think first we have one candidate that is running unopposed. So we thought it might, what I would like to have her do, Peg, is introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what a library trustee does.
First of all, I moved to Sutton. Can you hear me okay?
Need it a little bit.
Okay.
It's a directional mic.
Oh, okay. I moved to Sutton 13 years ago, and the very first thing I did when I got here, looking around before I actually moved, was to seek out the library. And it was a fantastic experience. It's a lovely little library. The people are wonderful, and it was one of the reasons I moved here. That being said, I love being a trustee. It's my second term here. It seems to be a very popular position, but you know, the library is a unique place. It's a unique resource for everyone in the town. It benefits everyone, children, teen, and adults. It offers more than books. It offers programs for every age and interest. There is a seed library for anyone who would like to come in and get native plant seeds. There's a library of things that has tools and craft kits, hotspots for the internet, games and other items. And so, you know, I love the book group and everything about it, the friends. trustee, my responsibilities are in the hiring and evaluating of the director, adopting library policies and plans, approving and supporting the budget. We meet regularly with the director to review reports and stay informed, and along with the director, we develop and review priorities for the library. But one of the most important duties is to be sure that the library delivers the best possible services for the residents of Sutton. And so that's it. I don't know what else to say.
We thought that since Peg was running unopposed, that she would introduce herself, and then you're welcome to stay if you wish, or you may...
Well, I think I will join my
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Now, we'll go down the table and have each of the candidates introduce themselves, and then I will have some questions for you. But first off, introduce yourself, and where is the other microphone? Okay. Go ahead, sir. If you have a green light, it's on. Push the button up. It's okay.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Jennifer Darling. I'm currently the secretary on the school committee, and I'm completing my first term. I've been a resident for over 18 years. Together with my husband, we are here raising our two sons. I have an 8th grader who will be continuing on to the high school next year, and our youngest is in 5th grade, and he'll be going to middle school next year.
That's thank you.
How you all doing? So my name is Wesley Stanhope, and I've been living in town for about 12 years. Myself and my wife, we came here after our firstborn, and we have 3 kids now, all 3 of them in the school from elementary to the middle school. Basically fell in love with this town because of the rural agricultural background and the small community. Lived in Ireland for 20 years, so that small, that cultural community is really good for us, and that's what we really do love. Basically, we really love this community, and I coached 3 soccer teams, got to know a lot of people in this community through that, and have been really involved with it ever since.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank the organizers and Paul for volunteering his time. I'm Christine Watkins. I grew up in Manchog Village. I chose to live here because my husband and I, when we were looking for a home after we got married, this is where we found, believe it or not, an affordable house. It took us about a year to find a home, and we were looking all over. And this is where they were building a new subdivision, and we got very fortunate with one of the first houses to go in, up in the Stonebridge Farms area in Wilkinsonville. That is where we raised our 3 children that are now adults. I am a CPA, but spent the last 30 years pretty much as a stay-at-home mother and a volunteer. Both of the CPAs on the select board are stepping down, so I do have some financial acumen that I think will benefit the board. I've also been a volunteer at the school library, youth soccer, Chain of Light since 1999, coordinating the event on my own for several years. The school building committee back in like 2006 to 9. Currently the housing production plan. I worked with Peggy and Norma on Sutton Recreational to fundraise money for the American Legion Park renovation down on Darling Lane in Manchog Village. And I'm currently the secretary of the Sutton Historical Society and the de facto Manchog historian.
Good evening, my name is Shawn Buzzell. Born and raised here in Massachusetts, and as a product of military service, I left the state for about 20 years before deciding to return and settle back here in Massachusetts. My family and I have lived in Sutton for about 2 years now, and in that time, we've tried to weave ourselves into the community as much as humanly possible, always actively seeking out the next form of engagement with the community. My call to the select board and the reason for running today is the fact that I very much so believe in service above self, and It's something I'd like to continue to do, so I'd like to find the best way possible to serve my community.
Thank you all. We have one other candidate who submitted videotape, so Jen, if you could run her introduction.
Erin did her responses through video, so just she was responding to a slightly longer introduction question, so just FYI. And sometimes she says the number at the top, so sorry about that. Just excuse our little technical difficulties with that. And the numbers may not match because we reordered, but you know.
Good evening. My name is Erin Reid-Erikson, and I am running for one of the 2 open seats for school committee. I want to first thank the organizers of this forum, the Sutton Democratic Committee, for this opportunity to join the first, but hopefully not last, candidates forum. I also want to apologize that I couldn't be there in person. There is one work trip per year that I absolutely cannot move, and this date happened to fall on my annual trek to Phoenix, Arizona for a big work conference. Luckily, the organizers provided me the opportunity to pre-record my answers to the questions, even though I'm worried it makes more work for them. So good luck with the technology. A little bit about me. I moved to Sutton in 2013 when my husband and I were looking for a better school system for our children. We both love antique homes and found a perfect one for our growing family here in Sutton. Something that might set me apart is that I'm a parent of 5 children with 2 sets of twins. And with 5 kids all attending the Sutton school system, I am definitely invested in the success of our schools and hope that some of my skill sets kind of will help on the school committee. First is, I guess, my years of community involvement. I've served as a parent member of the school council for 5 years and volunteered with the PTO's enrichment program, where I spent 8 years as the program lead and 5 years on the PTO board. But you know what? This may not necessarily set me apart, as I know most folks who you will hear from tonight have been involved in helping out the town in one way or another. So switching skill sets for a moment to the professional side, perhaps my work as a lawyer may set me apart and be helpful for the school committee. I am an attorney, barred in Massachusetts and Connecticut, and have worked for over 20 years in employment law. If you want to learn more about me and my running for school committee, you can visit my website, which is www.voteerinre.com. Thanks so much.
Okay, so we understand that, Jen, you're under a deadline? Okay, so we're going to ask our questions of the school committee candidates first, so that Jen can make her other engagement. So, Jen, what do you believe is the core mission of the school committee, and how would you fulfill that mission in today's challenging educational landscape?
Okay, thank you. I believe the core mission of the school committee is to support the school community by promoting and upholding a vision of academic excellence, social responsibility, personal growth, and lifelong learning. I will say that I may have gotten that from our school website and adjusted it. So this includes embracing a positive, collaborative, and safe environment where all students and educators can thrive. So to fulfill this mission, I'd focus on 3 key areas: communication, support, and accountability. First, I would continue to prioritize open and transparent communication between the committee, school leadership, families, and students. Second, I'd advocate for adequate resources. What does that look like? I will continue to ask the hard questions about the budget. I'd continue to speak up and understand what are the needs of our district. Lastly, I would work to ensure that equity, academic achievement, and student well-being remain at the forefront of every decision we make. This would require the committee to be both visionary and practical, and I'm committed to working collaboratively to meet those challenges.
Thank you.
This is question 5. The core mission of the school committee is to ensure that all students receive a high-quality education that prepares them for future success. This involves setting educational policies, overseeing the budget, and ensuring that the district's resources are used effectively to support student learning. In today's challenging educational landscape, fulfilling this mission requires a collaborative, proactive approach. So how would I do this? I guess I have said it before, but I would prioritize open communication and collaboration with all stakeholders, and that includes teachers, parents, students, and community members. By actively seeking input and feedback, I think we better understand the needs and concerns of our town and can make informed decisions that reflect everybody's collective goals. Additionally, I would advocate for transparent, equitable allocation of resources to ensure that all students have access to the tools and supports that they need to succeed. And last, I would focus on, kind of innovative solutions to address these unique challenges that we have, like supporting mental health and well-being. Since I don't think students are ready to learn if they're under stress, we need program, we need support for that. We need to adapt to educational standards that are changing, and I really want to be careful about the way we integrate technology and the use of screens in our school day. I think by staying informed about best practices and emerging trends in education, we're going to be in a better position to support our students.
Jen, our next question. In a community with diverse viewpoints on education, how will you balance representing all constituents while making decisions that best serve students' educational needs? Please include a specific example of how you've worked across different viewpoints to achieve a goal.
So I ask a lot of questions. I talk to parents and teachers and students, and I ask how they see an issue. I ask how a policy would impact them. I try and get a handle on what is really going on. Last year, I was on the wellness committee. In the last town election, the health curriculum was an important topic. I wanted to understand and get involved. In the end, our committee was more focused on wellness, and the health part wasn't so much addressed, but that's the one example I came up with.
So since I'm a stickler for making sure I answer the full question, I will start with an example of working across different viewpoints. So I work for a global law firm that specializes in helping employers manage their relationship with employees. Instead of litigating or going to court as I did earlier in my career, I help run a corporate department, and my team in particular manages all of the client alerts, articles, and books that we publish. So my specific example involves a series that is designed to help employers understand their responsibilities in various countries around the world. So not just US or following US law. And we do this by asking the exact same series of questions for every country we cover. So we recently had to overhaul this publication as it wasn't kind of doing enough to kind of bridge the divide between US law and all of the countries we covered. As part of this process, we spoke to both clients and all of our attorneys across the globe. And we had to resolve a lot of diverse opinions, juggle and prioritize those changes, essentially to make sure the publication wasn't too US-centric in the questions we asked. And we didn't want to kind of pander to any one individual opinion, but had to kind of pull back and make sure we were staying with the consistent theme of, does this stick to our main goal of helping to educate? So, I don't know, how does this example tie into the other part of the question of kind of balancing and representing all constituents? I think it's a good example to show that you need to solicit input. You work in partnership, and for the school committee, it's really working in partnership with the staff and teachers, folks in the educational field who are going to know the best and be the experts on certain parts, and keeping our eye on the main goal, which is to provide the best educational experience to our students to prepare them for life after graduation. Kind of narrowing down that focus to putting that student experience center is the most important. So I want everyone to graduate with the core skills, math, science, English, everything that a future workforce needs. But we're going to need to find room in the budget for also project-based learning, workforce partnerships, like the senior internship experience, and kind of other experiences are going to help each individual student interact meaningfully. So during this year's budget process, for example, students from the high school and middle school came to a school committee meeting and spoke really passionately and eloquently about, that one special class or a teacher that helped.
I think there's a glitch with that file, so I'm going to try to fix it, and we can move on to the next question for now. Let me work on that. Yeah.
The motto of Sutton, adapt and improvise. I mean that in every positive way that you can think. Jen, with ongoing budget constraints, what specific metrics and values guide your prioritization decisions regarding programs like AP courses, foreign languages, arts, early childhood education, and sports?
So during the budget process this year, in the last 3 years, a nice starting point I would ask is, how many students would this impact? I know that's not like the end-all be-all, but for the most part, that was a great opportunity for us to start there. There were many times where something had less than 10 students. It didn't necessarily mean it got cut, but it was a great starting point. I would also like to say that Erin and I are friends, and I've been wanting her to run for years, and if around town you see our signs together, it's on purpose. I've been telling people I'm not running against Erin, I'm running with Erin. Maybe naive of me, but I really had to look at this like either way. I mean, especially if Erin gets on, I mean, she's a gift. She really is, her knowledge, her expertise. So I knew her responses were going to be outstanding.
I'm just going to say, it's a little distracting since you guys are mirroring my screen for me to be messing with the video file, so let's just keep going and we'll come back to Erin's answer later.
Okay. Next question. How do you view the school committee's role in addressing cultural divisions within the community that impact our schools? And what specific approaches would you take to foster constructive dialogue?
I approach this issue with optimism and confidence in the efforts of our educators. Our schools work hard to create a welcoming and safe environment where students from all backgrounds feel respected and supported. However, cultural divisions in the broader community can still impact our schools in subtle and significant ways. The school committee plays a critical role in addressing these divisions by implementing policies that encourage inclusion, respect, and mutual understanding.
Jen, do you want me to move on?
This is question 3. So the school committee's role should be one of being a listener, not an instigator. I believe in the power of listening, really listening to people's concerns, knowing that our values are shaped by the experiences we've had, and no one experience should be viewed as more right than another. While I am not on Facebook and I do not use social media, primarily because I just don't have time with 5 kids and a full-time job, I promise to be available to listen to concerns and figure out how we can best meet the needs of students. I think that a steadfast rule that the school committee should keep to is that we adhere to the rules of civil discourse when divisive issues come up. What I mean by that is being respectful, professional, maintaining staff privacy, and recognizing that our students are closely watching us, so we want to model for them the right way to have difficult conversations. For those who have worked with me both in my day job and volunteering at the school, I think would agree that I am kind of a no drama kind of person. I believe we've gotten too good at looking at what divides us, and my interest in school committee stems from the basic, maybe optimistic, premise that I think everyone who does speak up and get involved is doing so for the right reasons. So I assume good intent. We all care deeply about how our children are educated, so let's focus on common ground, looking forward, and getting something done. And finally, one specific approach to foster constructive dialogue that I would like to explore is looking at how public comment is handled at school committee meetings. Because the public comment happens in the first 5 minutes of every meeting, it can really feel like there's a disconnect between someone bringing up a concern and the committee responding to it. I know I felt that when I made comments. So I think there are small and simple changes that could help.
You're going to go back?
Question number 3.
Okay. About the budget constraints?
Yes.
With ongoing budget constraints, what specific metrics and values guide your prioritization decisions regarding programs like AP courses, foreign languages, arts, early childhood education, and sports?
I will start with my main guiding principles, which are that a student-centered approach should guide decisions, and there must be a balance. With this idea of balance, the first is to look at the balance between the lower and the upper schools. So for several years, the focus, rightfully so, was on addressing the loss of students to BBT. To help stem the tide, at that time, the focus was put into creating various pathways and adding to course.
Sorry, I'm going to just move on to the next question. Sorry about the confusion with this one.
So, most gents, I'm skipping the next question and going on to the next one after that, having to deal with how will you ensure transparency and effective communication with the community, particularly around controversial issues that arise in our schools. I skipped the one about town departments.
So, when you're a member of a larger committee and you're not the chairperson, you don't always have control about what message gets relayed to the public. I am hoping that if elected, that I will take more of a significant role this term. So that's a goal. But I have changed as far as most people who reach out, whether it's email, mostly email, I will respond to. I make sure that I say I am just responding as a member and not as a, not on behalf of the entire committee. I think that's important. Because yeah, we are a 5-person board, so.
Thank you. Jen, are you okay for Erin?
All right, here's the answer to question 6. To ensure transparency and effective communication with the community, particularly around kind of controversial issues in our school, I think the school committee should just, adopt a proactive and inclusive approach. Like this involves creating kind of multiple channels for open dialogue, such as town hall meetings, surveys, dedicated email addresses where community members can share their thoughts and concerns. Our school committee already does a lot of this. And in addition, I guess it's essential always to provide kind of clear and timely updates on decisions and developments within the school district. Nobody wants to be kind of the last person that hears important news. This can be achieved kind of through regular newsletters, and such as the superintendent's update that Caitlin instituted this year, important updates on the school district's website, and just public forums. Transparency in decision-making processes, I think, helps always build credibility and makes the community well-informed about the rationale behind various actions and policies. And as I mentioned in an answer to an earlier question, I think when addressing controversial issues, the school committee should emphasize the importance of kind of sticking to that respectful and constructive dialogue, ensuring that all discussions are conducted professionally. It just helps create that positive environment, and it models effective communication and conflict resolution, which is really what we want to demonstrate to our students and community, that you can engage in kind of thoughtful and respectful conversations even when opinions differ.
Okay. So let's skip that question. I'm going to move on to the question about transparency. Okay, did I already ask that?
Yes.
I did.
So you can do question 7.
Jen, what is your stance on coordinating with other town departments regarding new housing, commercial development, and how would you advocate for school funding needs as the town grows? I think the primary issue is coordination with the town.
Okay. So, I'm very familiar with coordinating with the town. So currently I'm the community liaison for a planning project with Jen Hager, but in regards to housing, not much. And I've already, I've had several meetings and discussions with our town manager, town planner, just trying to get a better understanding about the financial future and ability to stay relevant. Erin and I recently sat down with Jim Smith, just trying to understand some of his slides from his select board meeting.
This is question 4. My stance is that there must absolutely be coordination because anything the town is doing is going to have an impact on the schools. For example, adding housing and the density of that housing Well, those proposals will impact school enrollment. And supporting responsible commercial development will hopefully grow financial support for the schools. Not to mention that area businesses can offer internship and employment opportunities. I think this question also gets to the bigger concern of funding. And I want to be clear that I think the school committee's biggest challenge in the next 3 years is going to be funding. In my interview with the Sutton High School newspaper, I cited some sobering estimates that came from Town Hall and the school's business manager. Both estimate increasing budget shortfalls with projected deficits within 3 years of $1.8 million for the town and nearly $1 million for the school. These are significant numbers for a small town, and their impact is going to be felt throughout the community. Responsible governance, in my view, means we should start the hard work now of looking at our budgets, talking with one another, prioritizing, rather than waiting until we face a fiscal crisis. I think we all can agree that, public safety remains a priority, but we also need to be talking about other essential town services. I don't want to put the senior center or library and pit them against the school, because I think that's doing a real disservice to both sides. I also don't want to spend the next 3 years on the school committee having to cut program after program, because there really is no more so-called fat to cut from an already incredibly lean budget. So I think coordinating with the Board of Selectmen and the new town manager will be essential.
Last question, Jen. What strategies would you pursue to maximize state and alternative funding sources for Sutton schools to reduce the burden on local taxpayers while maintaining educational quality?
Okay. So, when I first got involved on school committee, I quickly realized that it's not like any other position I had volunteered for before. Other times I've been able to fundraise, whether, or seek sponsorships, different things. So for school committee, our options are open school choice seats, seek grants, and the town can allocate more money one way or another. So grants, I land on grants. And our business office and our district office are doing a great job. The last several meetings, they've come forward with some ideas. And anytime we can go after a grant to improve our HVAC system or something that isn't student-facing, then we can put more money towards education. So grants is what.
This is question 7. To maximize state and alternative funding sources for Sutton schools and reduce the burden on local taxpayers, I would use a kind of multifaceted approach. First, I think actively seeking out and applying for state grants and funding programs are important. They can support educational initiatives that we really need. So this includes staying informed about available opportunities and deadlines for these grants and ensuring that grant applications are prepared to meet all the requirements. Collaborating with experienced grant writers, of which I know we have some in our district, and leveraging kind of data to demonstrate the impact and necessity of funding can significantly enhance our chances of securing these resources. Some of this has absolutely been done in the past. But I've also heard kind of through the grapevine that Sutton does leave a lot of grant funding dollars behind. Of course, I agree that any grants we pursue need to have a kind of a cost-benefit analysis. You don't want to pursue a grant, for example, that is ultimately going to cause you more headaches and board problems than it actually solves. Additionally, I think we can explore partnerships with local businesses, nonprofit organizations, and community groups to kind of create alternate funding opportunities. So these partnerships can provide kind of the financial support or just actually the resources and expertise that might benefit our schools. For example, businesses might sponsor specific programs or provide internships and mentorship opportunities for students. A lot of them already do. We have this network, why don't we take advantage of it? And then nonprofits, they can offer grants and collaborate on educational projects that align with their mission. That's how we brought in some new curriculum into the lower grades, because we went to some nonprofits and educational consortiums. So I think kind of tapping into this broader network is going to help, reduce reliance on local taxes. We want to ultimately kind of diversify our funding sources and actively pursue kind of all available opportunities so that we can ensure that the Sutton schools continue to grow.
Well, thank you. That's so we have completed the questions that we had prepared in advance for our school committee candidates. So thank you, Jen. Thank you.
Thank you guys for bearing with us with the budgets. We're, first time format, first time we're seeing the history. Appreciate it.
That's why we adapt and improvise.
And I don't want to be messing with it while you guys are.
We're moving on to the planning board candidate. Wes, your first question.
Sure, Paul.
What do you see as the planning board's most critical function, and how would your expertise and approach fulfill that responsibility in today's challenging housing environment?
Yeah, sure. So a little bit more about myself. I have about over 20 years experience dealing with planning, consulting with building developers on construction on both sides of ponds, both over in Europe and here. Looking at how to do sustainable design. I actually have a master's degree in sustainable design from Boston Architectural College, so how to actually make developments work, not just urban sprawl, but how to make developments work well with the environment and with the community it works with, or it's going to be built within, or not built within if it doesn't work. So that is taking that to the background and leveraging with planning, because what is planning supposed to do? It's looking at the not just now today or 5 years, looking at long-term planning for a community. And how is it supposed to be developed, or some parcels not developed over time, and having a master plan and enacting that over time, and ensuring that there are safeguards on the types of developments that are going to be built to make sure it works well with the community. It's not me. But, so making sure that there's actually a good plan of any developments, it's going to be a good review, and if it's, being the safeguards for the community to ensure that we are in a good place in the future.
Thank you. Our second question. For the audience, the median price for a home in Sutton is currently $639,000. 82% of the housing inventory are homes with 3 or more bedrooms. And only 38% of the residents in Sutton have children. So Stan, Wes.
I get that a lot, it's okay.
Next question. How would you address the mismatch between our town's demographics and the type of housing inventory currently available? How would you help create more opportunities for seniors to downsize their home and increase the amount of suitable starter homes for new families?
Yeah, sure. So I'd like to use data and statistics to help drive the decisions we make. Like some of that statistics aren't necessarily a bad thing, where if somebody has a home, maybe they raised their family, and the kids went off to school, to college, or they went off and got a job, and they're going to stay in the house for many years to come. That's not necessarily a bad thing. However, we do not necessarily have the homes that if somebody wants to sell their home, if they're in their 70s or 80s, I've been down to the senior center and talked to Tim and Michelle down there. And we do have quite a few people that would like to sell their home, and maybe rent is what the actual census is, not necessarily sell a 3,000 square foot home and buy a 2,000 square foot home. So there is different types of, units we would want to build within Sutton, whether it's rental or smaller size homes, so that they could actually go to a different home in the actual community, not necessarily have to leave the community. And on the same opposite side of the spectrum, like we're in a school right now, the kids within the school, where do they go in 15 years' time? If they want to go off to college, live their early life, and then come back to the community, is there a place that they could? So I'm actually chair of the Housing Production Plan Update Working Group Committee. It's a long name for a group of 15 of us that are working on this actual problem right now. And we're just finishing up. We're going to be presenting on the 29th over at the Town Hall at 7 p.m. But we do have recommendations for different types of ways in which we can actually help out the community on this. And that is looking at different developments or different parcels that could be used to help with this type of situation. And I'd like to invite people over there to do that during that presentation.
Thank you.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, if anybody was following our questions online, we initially had questions that were a little more detailed with some of the things in the housing production plan, like MBTA and 40B and all that. And we took them out because they are really a different conversation. So I think it's relevant, I think it's important, but it's an ongoing conversation. So Wes pointed you to the meeting to go to sort of learn more about that. All happening now, all very relevant, just not quite right for this forum. So I just wanted to follow up on that in case you saw those questions in the early batch.
There's a lot of legal jargon. Don't want anybody to be confused. So it takes a presentation to go through it all. So we don't want to confuse anybody, just having an open mic session.
Thank you. Next question. What is your vision for balancing Sutton's growth with maintaining its rural character? And what specific zoning approaches would you champion to achieve this balance?
Okay, well, Sutton's rural character is what's key to Sutton. For those of us who have either grew up here or like myself who came here because of the actual rural character. So we wouldn't want to see urban sprawl throughout all of Sutton, because then it wouldn't necessarily be Sutton like it has been. But we do need to be considerate of the growth that does need to occur, like we just had in the last question there, the actual smaller size units that somebody who wants to downsize to a smaller unit. But the key, what you just had in the question there, was zoning. So where in the town is that's what's important. Not anywhere development, not anywhere bylaw where the actual large-scale development could occur anywhere in town. So finding parcels or zones, like say down 146 right now, part of the Housing Production Plan Committee, we actually did look at locations where actual development or having a live, work, play style development, where you have economic development as well, works because of the zone which it could be put in, not necessarily having anywhere any type of development throughout the town. So I would welcome anybody to that meeting as well.
Next one. How will you improve transparency and meaningful community engagement during the planning processes, particularly around controversial development proposals that could significantly impact neighborhoods?
This is big for the community, and I think the community needs to be involved. It's a two-way street. For those that maybe are not aware of it, there's a 40B development that's proposed on Burbank Woods. It's called Burbank Woods on Burbank Road, and it's near me. And there's a good amount of people in the community that do not necessarily want it because it has a safety issue, so it has 26-foot access, and there's a lot of concerns with it on safety and environmental. Now, what I would say is the community needs to rally and be part of it itself and come to the planning board and come to the town and have a spokesperson as well, or spokespeople to actually represent and be part of the community. And the planning board needs to actually listen to those people. So it's two ways, and that's where, from the Burbank Woods side, I've been that spearhead of the community in my area, and talking with the planning board in different parts of the community. But if I'm on the planning board, I know that pain. So talking with the community on any of these developments that necessarily don't fit within our rural community.
Last question. From a town revenue perspective, what types of commercial and residential development would you prioritize to strengthen Sutton's tax base while minimizing strain on infrastructure and services?
Well, the answer is a little bit of a mix, because if it's sprawling development, we need to increase the amount of services, and that costs more money. And also, if we just put in residential units don't necessarily pay for themselves. During the housing production plan working group, Christine actually did a calculation on 181 units would cost over $200,000 in revenue to the town to prop it up on taxes. So just building residential units doesn't necessarily do a benefit for the town on taxes over time. Whereas doing a mixed development, and one of the ones that we would recommend in the future is what's called a 4DR, 4DS smart growth. Again, we'll present on it in the actual meeting presentation the 29th. But this is where we do a mixture of businesses and residential together. And if we do something like this, we actually get funding from the state. So it's a benefit in multiple ways to the town. The other thing is to try to prop up more on the actual business side, where we get more revenue for the consolidated development versus just relying on residential. Because residential, if we get 80-something% of our taxes come just from residential right now, that's not a way for the future, just to keep the town finances running. So looking for more on the actual business side over time versus just relying on residential developments.
Great, thank you. I think that, so that finishes our question for the planning board candidates. Do you have any famous last words?
Last words? I mean, I kissed that Barney Stone twice, so I can keep on going. But I think people do want to get home again tonight. But what's that? Well, I mean, I just like we recap, I have a lot of experience in consulting, construction industry, environmental, sustainability, and a lot of time spent in the rural communities. So it all kind of boils together for this community. I'm passionate about Sutton, and been coaching soccer here for 10 years, 3 teams, know the community, and been involved as chairs of housing production plan update, know the laws, and what we're dealing with. And if we don't deal with like the affordable housing, it's going to cause us some issues. So that's why I do recommend come to the actual meeting on the 29th, learn about it if you have any concerns, and we'll tackle it together. Thank you.
Thank you, Wes. We save the best for last. Candidates for the select board, 1-year term, and Shawn and Chris are both running for that position. So when I'll be asking the question, as I ask the questions, Chris, I'm going to ask you first on the first question, and then when we get to the second question, Shawn, I'll let you read it, so we can alternate back and forth that way. So, Chris, what do you believe is the most critical function of the select board, and how would your leadership approach fulfill that responsibility in today's challenging municipal environment?
Thank you. I'm going to go with the master plan. So the Home Rule Charter defines what each board is supposed to be doing for the town. And the select board develops the broad policies that are approved by the voters at town meeting. And the guiding document for that is really the master plan. And so our master plan was updated in 2012. I forget how many members were on that committee. There were surveys that went out. It addressed open space, it addressed housing development, it addressed economic growth. And just like in a corporation, you need to have a guiding document to base your decisions on, or you're just reaching out into the abyss. And additionally, the select board is responsible for the general bylaws, the zoning bylaws, the open space plan, the Shaw master plan for the farm. Without a guiding document to let the community and the boards know what the community wants, we're not all going to be satisfied. So I think additionally, the select board members need to be more engaged with the community they serve. So not every board has every member elected, but the select board does. And it's important to understand that the way the town government is established, the school committee and the superintendent are separate from the select board and the town manager. So we have one combined town budget, but the school committee is in charge of the school, the select board is in charge of hiring the town manager. The town manager is responsible for all the day-to-day operations, including hiring a lot of department heads. But we need to be able to communicate effectively with the town manager and make sure that he's being transparent, sharing information in a timely manner to ensure that the board can be implementing the plans that the citizens wanted through their creation and approval of the master plan at town meeting. So as much as we like to look at the select board and blame sometimes our boards, the true answer is everything that the town has for guiding documents, we approved, the collective body, the voters. And so one of the big things that was recently approved happened back in October of 2021. Unified UGPG was granted an economic development incentive program through the state to develop what was the aggregate sand pit. And surprisingly, a majority of the population didn't even know this was in the pipeline. And so on October of 21, there was a warrant article to approve a tax incremental financing agreement for Unified that would equate to $48 million in tax savings over a 15-year period. That entity is an international company under the umbrella of Robert Kraft, and they were coming off a 15-year TIF for the corporate headquarters on Route 146. There are over 7,000 registered voters in our town. We don't have a quorum for town meeting. We have a quorum for every other board. And so 67 people made a decision that basically, for FY26, saved Unified almost $400,000 in tax revenue. So we're all sitting here wondering about the fiscal cliff and our budget and how we're going to raise money. Well, the select board has an opportunity to decide whether or not to continue with that program. And there's other issues coming up with regard to that project. So it's very wonderful that this group has organized this presentation to meet the candidates, but it would even be better if we had 500 people on May 12th at the town meeting. Even though the meeting is boring and the issues may not seem interesting, in the long run, everything that happens to this town, the big issues, get voted on by us, the voters, and we need to be more engaged. Sorry, I went off on a tangent.
And so the basic answer here is that the select board establishes the strategic direction and coordinates the activities of the other boards and the town manager. That's a pretty simple answer in terms of how the select board goes about it. The discerning difference here is just the same thing that Christine's already discussed. The select board is probably one of the more visible boards in town. They set the tone and the rhetoric for how the town views problem sets in their primary guiding light in terms of what the town should or should not do. In that, they don't spend a lot of that time dedicated to transparency in terms of how they're making that decision, what information they're using to make that decision. They don't spend a lot of time educating the public or driving civic engagement. As Christine said, it should be the townspeople that make a lot of those decisions. And more often than not, you'll see townspeople go in front of the select board, state complaints, raise issues, draw concern to the issue, but nothing's really said or done about it afterwards. And the issue for that is the fact that most people the town generally aren't interested until it directly affects them. I think moving forward, in terms of the way the select board should operate, is they should bring a little bit more transparency and ask for a little bit more civic engagement in how they do that. But that requires people to go out from the committee itself or the board itself and speak to the public, engage the public. I am not a fool. I do not believe that I have all the answers or that I have the requisite background and absolute understanding of every minute detail in this town. I'd be a fool to think so. In my leadership style, I have often described as a servant leader. A servant leader is someone who works for people. Their success is defined by the success of those they serve. In that, the most important part is understanding that the answer does not come from me. The answer comes from the people in the room. It comes from the townspeople. It's important to me that townspeople weigh in on it. I don't believe that I would make a decision for the town without input from anyone in the town. I've spent a lot of time over the last few weeks changing a lot of my viewpoints and truly understanding how the town looks and views their problems. I think the biggest part of this as well is the fact that in that leadership style, Sutton is my home, and it will continue to be my home for the foreseeable future. My children are in the schools. I drive on these roads every day. I face the same issues that you and everyone else in this community faces, and I will continue to do so for decades to come. But most importantly, again, I'd like to reiterate the fact that transparency and education are what the select board should be striving for. Not spouting divisive rhetoric, not telling people what they should or should not be mad about. They should be educating the public and having the public return and provide comment.
Thank you. Shawn, what is your stance on new housing and commercial development in Sutton? And how would you ensure it benefits town revenue without overburdening infrastructure or raising taxes?
This is a hard question. At the end of the day, I don't think there's anyone who's running for any office in town this year that believes that some form of development is not required to move forward. The town will have to make tough decisions. They have the housing production planning meeting that's already happening in terms of developing a 40R for the town, which basically opens the way for development for medium and high density housing, depending on what they end up briefing as a presentation somewhere in town. Everyone understands that the more housing you build, the greater the demand on infrastructure. There are ways to curb that, especially when it comes to residential. It comes in the form of medium and high density housing to reduce needs on traffic, road patterns, public safety. You can build smaller units. You can cap them at age to try to discourage people with families from moving in and placing additional strain on the school system. There's lots of tools at our disposal that we can utilize to be able to do that. But as you build more residential, even though we know there's a need and a demand for it here in town, with over 90% of the people here in town owning residence that they live in, there's a very small available housing inventory for renting. As you amend that, you increase demand. And so when we look at that problem set, we have to look for other avenues of approach, and that comes in the form of commercial development. No one in town wants to pay more taxes, but ultimately, the cost for running the town's operations will continue to grow each year. On average, the budget increases anywhere from 2.5% to 3%. When you box that against the fact that the Proposition 2.5, we're closed off to how much we can gain tax revenue annually, you start to run into the problem set of you need more of something. The current select board's done a lot of work in terms of commercial development and bringing commercial enterprises into the town, but there's nothing forecasted for the immediate future. And that new income revenue generation is completely dropped off at a point where we are maxed out in terms of tax revenue and tax receipts. So the town has an interesting point where they want to continue to develop commercial, but what kind of commercial? It's not a laissez-faire effort, just zoning something and allowing someone to purchase the land and throw down whatever they want. We talk a lot about rural character in the town, so the town has to start defining what rural character looks like and what they want to do with it. In that, the town has to invest effort and attitude towards shaping what the town will become in the next 10, 20, or 30 years. And they need to develop a plan for how they want to shape what type of commercial development does come into the town. Understanding that with that commercial development, that also requires additional residential development to support it. So in the all in all, I am pro development here in town. I understand the need for development in town. But I want people to understand that it can be done carefully and with an exercise amount of judgment that prevents this urban sprawl creep that we're all so very afraid of. Everyone selected to live in Sutton because they didn't want to live in an urban city. And that's fine. I absolutely agree. I chose to live here for those same reasons. But I also understand that development is required. There is no point at any point where the revenue in town can continue to sustain itself. And I'll get more into that with further questions later on.
Same question. Hard act. My answer would be mindful growth in areas with the proper infrastructure. So for the town of Sutton, pretty much almost 90% of the houses in the development require private wells and private septic systems. We currently have 2 standalone water districts that are not part of the municipal government. One is the Wilkinsonville Water District, which is in the northeast corner, and the other is the Manchog Water District, which is in the southwest corner. I agree with both Wes and Shawn about Sutton's story is the rural feel, and that's why people move here. So I'm a member of the Housing Production Working Group, and exactly what Shawn's talking about is what we're looking at. How do we maximize the land and not give it away for nothing? So we know our demographics are shifting in the community. In the last 20 years, we've gone from an average age of 36.1 to 44.6. The 5 to 18-year-old demographic is exactly equal to the over 65 demographic. So we have a lot of needs on different ends of the spectrum. So our main issue right now, as Wes pointed out with the Burbank Woods, is 40B. 40B is affordable housing, and Sutton only has 1.5% of a required 10%. So what the Housing Production Group is focusing on is how can we get to the 10% so that we can control what future development comes in, and how can we maximize the revenue on development for the available land that we have that's within the water districts or close to the regional transit system, that's 146, and the commuter stations in Worcester and Grafton. So Wes tapped on quickly about 40R and 40S, and he didn't want to go into detail. So basically what 40R is, picture the field over at Market 32, and picture on the bottom floor, just like in 1900, there'd be businesses and restaurants and stores. And just like in the old days, people would live above the stores, probably 2 stories of apartments. And the state is really pushing that. And so when you assign an overlay district for a 40R, the state right off the bat gives you a $200,000 payment. Once you start developing the units, you get $3,000 per unit. And then furthermore, 40S Smart Growth says, wow, you've done what we wanted. And we know that now you might have children that could burden your school system. So for every child in that development, for which the tax revenue off that development isn't enough to cover that child's per pupil's cost, we're going to give you money for that child. So for the Housing Production Group, that looks very amenable for us. Additionally, 40B, affordable housing, Wes mentioned 16 units going in Burbank Woods. Those are single-family units. If 10% of those units are affordable, only 2 of them would count towards getting us closer to our subsidized housing inventory requirement with the state. But again, state law is always written to direct the citizens to do what the state really wants to accomplish. And what they want to accomplish right now is rental units, affordable market rental units for young people starting out and for older people who want to downsize. And so what they give you with affordable is a bonus. So if you have 100 apartments and 10%, we'll use 25% are affordable, you have 25 deed-restricted affordable units that can only go through a lottery to people who are income qualified. However, the state recognizes the entire development as going towards your subsidized housing inventory. So for 25 affordable units, we get credit for the whole 100-unit complex. So where we are short about 300 units, and we have limited space with infrastructure that could handle these types of development, it makes sense that we do rental. Additionally, the state encourages select boards and communities to collaborate with a developer of this type of housing. So you probably all heard about all the stuff going on in Millbury over the last year or so with the Rice Road development. They were pushing back, and then the development went from 90-something units to, I don't know what it ended up with. But Sutton's Select Board actually entered into a memorandum of understanding with at least 2 40B developers last year. One on Ormsby Road, and the other was going to be right in a field beyond Market 32. We said, we will work with you to design something that fits our community, and we're willing to collaborate. It benefits the developer because the state then helps them with the lottery and whatnot. Both developers withdrew their proposals because of our infrastructure. So we have to be mindful of what we want. We have to try to fit it in with our community and make sure that we're not going to overburden or reduce the quality of life for those of us who are already here paying taxes. Our water system is not reservoir driven, it's all well-based. There's PFAS starting to be in neighboring towns. It may be an issue coming up in some of our water areas. We need to be mindful that when we start developing and are tapping it into an aquifer, it can impact neighborhoods that are already existing. So again, mindful growth, proper infrastructure, and proper research.
Thank you, Chris. You guys gave such great answers to that question, I think that you included the answers to the next question. So, because I think you both spoke eloquently about, with limited resources, how you prioritize competing town needs, infrastructure, public safety, education, and what specific metrics guide your decision-making process. I think you've already answered that question in answer to the other question. So let's move on to the next question. What is your philosophy regarding collaboration between the select board, the school committee, and the planning board on issues that affect multiple aspects of town life and governance?
So it's me again.
That's you.
Okay. So, back in 2021, I attended a meeting that blew my mind. I then sponsored a citizen's petition, which I didn't even know was a thing, until someone said, oh, any citizen can put something on a town warrant. You only need 10 signatures of voters that are registered. So that's sent me down a path, much to my husband's dismay, of spending a lot of time watching a lot of meetings. Now, Wes again mentioned the 40B for Burbank Woods. That doesn't come before planning. That comes before zoning. In Darling Lane and Manchog, for 2 years has been following a potential development that hasn't come before planning. It's before conservation because they want to put in a well. And then you have school committee that doesn't really necessarily answer to the select board, right? And then I guess those are pretty much the main ones. But I want to send a shout out to our cable department. So Sutton is probably in the lead compared to its neighbors with regard to recording all of the meetings. You can zoom into these meetings. You can, if you have cable TV, watch them on cable access. If you don't have cable, you can watch them live most of the time on YouTube. And if you're crazy like I am, you can drive all your chores while you listen to it like a podcast. Because it's important for board members to not only focus on their board and their agenda. We all, again as a collective body of voters, need to be watching all these meetings. I found that the most important part of the select board meeting is the town manager update. The most important part of the planning board meeting a lot of time is the abutting town notices. What's going on in Grafton? How are those 100 condos going to affect the traffic on Leland Hill Road as they commute down to Central Turnpike and 146? So my philosophy is, and I've suggested this to the select board previously, there are 5 members of the board. Why isn't each one of the board members tasked with following the agenda of one of the other boards so that at the end, when they're doing their little roundtable, they can say, oh, Burbank Woods is coming before zoning on May 13th. Make sure you're there. On May 29th, Housing Production Plan is going to be doing a community presentation about everything they've been concluding in the new in the new presentation that has to get approved by the state. So I am all for collaboration. The thing I've also learned that can constrict board members is open meeting law. So if you have a select board with with 5 members, no 3 members can gather together outside of that meeting because that would be a quorum. And every time there's a quorum, there has to be a posted agenda 48 hours before. So our select board members can't talk to each other outside of a meeting. And so even if there's going to be a walkthrough of a site for the planning board, 2 planning board members can go on the walkthrough, but as soon as 3 go on a walkthrough, they have to post it, and then they have to determine if the public's invited. So there's a lot of constraints. I know you were commenting about like lack of transparency and sometimes things like that. We have to be mindful of the lanes that each board is in, and then the lanes of open meeting law. So yeah, collaboration, getting together, having like a Saturday brainstorming group or working group with other boards where they look at direction of the town. I'm all for that.
I mean, just to follow on what Christine already said, she pretty much hit the nail on the head. None of these decisions are made in a vacuum. All the boards in the town, even the more obscure ones, have responsibility in a part of the pie. And what each board does and the decisions they make have a meaningful impact on the decisions that the other boards are or are not allowed to make in the future. Almost all the decisions go in front of one, or a decision that happens at one board most likely ends up, for some reason or another, in front of a different board at some point. And understanding why it's in front of them and why it matters to them is important. Staying educated on all the boards is very, very difficult. I've tried watching them all. It's very confusing. It's very convoluted. There's a lot that goes into it. Being able to sit down with those board members when things truly matter and being able to discuss what's happening is important. And being able to exercise with the information that they're gathering and providing to the public is also important. And in that, again, with the select board, the overall intent is to provide that meaningful guidance and strategic leadership to those boards so they're all working together. It's one thing for a school committee to vie for additional funding in the following year or asking to complete some different project that may have a competing requirement with other operational funding. If they present that to the public and make that a meaningful thing that the public demands, it may strip something that was prioritized already away from the operational budget. So it's important that we collaborate those efforts together.
Thank you. 2 questions to go. Shawn, how will you ensure transparency and effective communication with the community, particularly around controversial? I'm reading the wrong question. Oh, that was a school committee question. You don't want to answer that. Okay, got it. What specific strategies would you pursue to maximize state and grant funding opportunities to reduce the burden on local taxpayers while maintaining essential town services?
So first and foremost, I'm a huge proponent for 40R. As Christine already kind of talked about, got the weeds on, 40R opens up a whole slew of state funding, and then follow that along with the addition of 40S that covers down on additional revenue required to educate students who come as a product of 40R is pretty paramount in terms of how we can manage those issues going forward. When it comes to state and federal grants, the town manager spends a lot of time directing people in terms of what types of grants they want to go after, the types of projects the town is willing to undertake moving forward. There is tons of money that is often left out and on the table for communities to grab. And it takes a constant set of eyes watching to see what is meaningful and can be applied to the town's problem sets, with the understanding that usually at the conclusion of those grants, there's additional funding requirements to maintain whatever the grant had started working on. A case in point would be a few years ago, there were several grants being offered by the state that would allow for the hiring of a professional fire department. At the time, the town decided that it was not in the best interest of the community to apply for those grants because they knew full well that at the end of the grant period, they would then have the responsibility of paying for those firefighter salaries or letting them go. So they opted not to do that, nor did they have the infrastructure in place. The goal would be, again, to exercise a little bit of foresight and decision-making and decide what the community wants in the future going forward. And then chasing any and all grants to maximize state funding that comes in to be able to help us bridge that gap. The town has a lot of problems coming up on the horizon. We can talk about operational budget shortcomings, we can talk about school deficits, we can beat them blue in the face. But every day we talk about other things like public infrastructure, public safety, and things of that nature that we know we need to continue to addressing. Whether we bring in additional tax revenue or beef up the residential and commercial in the area, those problem sets don't go away. You know, a huge point of contention is public safety. Public safety is important to me. We don't necessarily have the greatest model in terms of public safety in our town. We are predominantly, sorry. Yes. Was not the word. Yes. So it's we rely, that's the word I'm looking for, on an on-call firefighter department. Okay? So basically, the amount of actual firefighters on staff is very, very low, and the remainder of the fire department is on-call firefighters. These are individuals that are required to maintain a whole host of certifications and training throughout the state, which is very difficult to maintain while maintaining another meaningful source of income. So we're reliant on volunteers who respond to emergencies here in the community for very little money. That works fine in a community that does not have a lot of calls, which Sutton does not currently, but it is increasing. We have a contract for ambulance service. That contract is negotiated with several neighboring towns. As of now, it's not a problem. Moving forward, as other towns continue to grow and develop and move to a professional public safety department, those contracts will go away. And what the committee will be left, or what the town will be left with, is the fact that they now have to negotiate that contract by themselves. When they go to negotiate that contract, what would have cost us $100,000, $150,000 when it was spread across 4 or 5 communities will now cost us $600,000, $700,000. A lot of that cost gets subsidized by insurance throughout the year, but if it's only responding to our community, that cost remains relatively high. Now we're stuck footing that bill whether we want to or not. And then moving forward, it makes it more expensive for us to address that problem. So now the cost to train, outfit, and equip, and build the infrastructure to support public safety is now exponentially more expensive and probably shuttered with lots of other crises and consequences the communities have to deal with. So again, when it comes down to civic engagement, it really boils down to what the community wants to be next. We're not talking about maintaining the status quo. That's not the goal. That's not the ambition. We should constantly be looking for proactive ways to better our community. And a lot of that can be done by identifying what's available in terms of state grants, because the state is already identifying needs for us and helping us address them at the time.
So what specific strategy would I use to maximize state grants? I would attend fall town meeting and I would approve the MBTA overlay district and the bylaw. The MBTA legislation has as a penalty for non-compliance the loss of discretionary funding. Sutton hasn't had a significant amount of these funds necessarily coming in if you look at the data. However, there's a little and other agencies in the legislation. So recently, going to your firefighter, one of the communities that was not in compliance was denied a grant to get turnout gear for their fire department, and the state legislature went berserk because that's not really what we should be doing with this MBTA. So our Housing Production Committee, again given a plug for May 29th, has come up with a district that will meet the letter of the law as far as assigning an overlay, and the legislation does not require that you actually build any units. You just have to assign a district. So our group was really focusing on, again, as I said before, maximizing the other available space in town to develop more affordable housing and not putting an overlay district that doesn't require affordable housing to be taking up that space. So that would be the first thing I would do. Secondly, the town is doing an amazing job getting grant funding, and I'm going to give a shout out to Jen Hager and the planning department and the highway department. But for FY24, our capital operating and contributions was $16.8 million. It was a $4 million increase over the prior year. And that was basically having to do with monies we got in for that whole project over on 122A to move all the sewer lines onto 122A off Blackstone Street. We've gotten a big chunk of money for the Depot Street Bridge that recently closed. And the Manchog Bridge, if anyone's been to Manchog Village, there's a little bridge right near the post office, near the Mill Pond, that is slated to be at least a 5-year project, and it's a $17 million project. And the state is providing the funding for that. So a lot of times, people are looking for the grants, but we may not always be meeting the parameters of what the grant requires. We just this year had a wonderful grant, a shout out to the Sutton Recreational Resources, of over $200,000 that the federal government gave us for a land and water grant that allowed us to renovate the playground down in Manchog. So that type of project and the Huff Road playground and the Unity Park would have never happened with the town's budget. So sometimes the town goes out for grants that improve our quality of life and not necessarily give us our basic services, and that's a nice touch, because it is nice to have these nice facilities in our community. And I think both Jen and Erin also gave a huge shout out to our local 501c3 organizations. The Sutton Fourth, the Gendron gave those, they do CPR, like it's a piece of equipment. Yes, and so that was from the Dudley Gendron, and we have probably more than our neighboring communities for that device. The Booster Club, the PTO, the Lions Club, the Sutton Historical Society, Unibank is a great partner for our town and for our community. We're very lucky to have Unibank in the Blackstone Valley. So, yes, we need to continue to look for grants, and yes, the town is already doing that, and Sutton's strength is our community, and that's why when you're there setting up for Oh My Gourd or the 4th of July Parade or Memorial Day, you feel like you're in a Hallmark movie on the Common with the cows and all that going on. So, yeah, that would be my answer. So, cool.
2 questions to go. How will you improve transparency and community engagement, particularly around complex decisions involving development, budgets, and long-term planning for town services? So you both sort of answered that, but if you want to elaborate.
I have been doing that since October of 2022. So in October of 2022, I sponsored a citizen's petition to have a quorum. We were asking for 108 registered voters, 1.5% of the registered voters, to be required to be at every town meeting. When you sponsor a citizen's petition, you're required to present before some of the boards. I had to present before Planning Board, Finance Committee, and Select Board. Maybe not Planning Board. Finance Committee is 9 members that are appointed by the town moderator. These members are not elected, they're appointed, the town moderator is elected. Not one of our appointed or elected members voted in favor of requiring a minimum amount of people at the town meeting. At times, the arguments were contentious. They told me that it would be detrimental to have such a requirement because the voters were apathetic. And they said that it was a communication problem. So, I mailed a postcard to every single home in the town of Sutton. Again, I don't lie to my husband, so I had them all in the garage, and I had to go and tell him I spent $1,000 to send a postcard to every household. And now, you got a postcard in the mail. There are signs around town. There's all kinds of communication and a robocall. And so prior to that quorum, citizens petition, there were only 5 meetings with over 150 attendees out of 26 meetings. And including that date, October of 22, and the 4 since then, we've had over 150 voters at every meeting. And we've had additional citizens petitions. And at the last fall town meeting, there were several planning bylaws for cottage housing. When the planning board was talking about putting that bylaw on the warrant, I was the only one attending the planning board meeting. And then when it was on the warrant and they had a public hearing, there were only 4 of us at that meeting. And when that bylaw came before FinCom, the chair said, well, did planning approve it? Then we're going to approve it. And then somebody actually read what was in it, and they said, wow, 16 housing units on a minimum of 3 acres, with 1.5 acres left green, with 6 hookups per wellhead and shared sewers, with only 100 feet of frontage in R1 where we require 250 feet and a minimum of 2 acres for a single family home. All of a sudden everybody started to pay attention. And so transparency is attending the meeting, reading the information, not just taking what you're being told as the answer. And it's very confusing. There was a meeting where they were discussing other post-employment benefits. And even the FinCom board didn't know the total amount of money that the town had put into that trust fund in the 1 year, because $100,000 of it was in the budget warrant article, and then another $350,000 was in the free cash fall budget article, and then we sold a cell tower and $500,000 came out of that and went into the trust. So even the people on the FinCom didn't know the answer to that. So it's our responsibility as the voters, as the citizens, as the town of Sutton has grown from 4,000 people to 10,000. If we want our community to be a certain way, then we have to take advantage of our civic responsibility. And in all honesty, being on the Historical Society, we are in the middle of America 250 in recognition of the Revolutionary War and all the events that led to the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. People fought for this. It's our responsibility to make the effort, and our cable department is making it very easy for us. So we can complain about transparency, but if we're not putting in the time, then we don't really have an argument. We have to just take what's decided by others, and it could be a very, very, very small minority.
I mean, again, I really don't like following Christine. She makes solid points, and she's absolutely right. It all boils down to civic engagement. That's the goal here. We want to bring as many people out to speak their minds and tell us truly what they want to happen in the community. Unfortunately, I'm a realist, and I understand that people are pretty apathetic about what goes on in town until it absolutely affects them and them alone. That's problematic, right? So it boils down to educating the public, using any and all forms to be able to do it. Elected officials in town should be out engaging community members every chance they get. When they're engaging community members, they should be talking about hot button issues every chance that they get. Understandably, back to the whole argument of quorum and open meeting laws, there are lines that have to be drawn in terms of what they can and can't do out in public face. But even still, there's ways to educate. They should be embracing social media. They should be guiding people away from places that provide bad information or create hollow echo chambers where people bounce ideas off and just get mad at one another until they rage and draw divisive lines inside the community. Everyone decides they hate one another. That's not the goal here. At the end of the day, we all want the same exact things, and I think that through education we can achieve those things in a civil way. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there. When it comes to dealing with complex decision-making here in town, a lot of it has to do with the fact of getting out ahead of the issue. Making sure that people understand why it's going to become problematic, why people are so divided about those topics, and being honest about those topics. Inviting people to have discussion well enough in advance so they can form the committees that are required to educate the population, go out, sign citizen petitions, and bring those issues forward, whether that be on an agenda or at a town meeting. They're all left open for discussion. So a huge part of me is definitely part of the community engagement. Over the since I've been here in town, I've noticed that the majority of engagement happens on Facebook, or at least that's what it feels like. When I go to meetings here in town, any meeting, it's an empty room. When I watch Zoom, it's 2 people there. 3 or 4 weeks after a meeting, maybe 100 or 200 people will have watched that meeting. But you can sure as well bet everyone has an opinion about it on Facebook. And that's not how a town is meant to be led. We have official media sources that we use to spread the town's information, and continuing to perpetuate that is important. Making sure that the town Facebook page is creating infographics and things like you're seeing this year in terms of the town warrant guide and the meeting that Jim Smith did, where he broke down what's going to happen at the town meeting and how the town meeting is conducted. These are important things, and getting people to be involved in that is also important. And again, an overarching goal of mine would be to increase the amount of civic engagement in terms of guiding how the town goes forward. So again, we talk about things like the rural capability or the rural aesthetic of the town. No one really knows what that means. Everyone has a different idea of what that is. Everyone says, well, this is what the town should look like moving forward, but no one really knows what that is. So unless you get people together in a room and you discuss it, no one will ever know, and we'll continue to be divided about it. It's important to be clear about the fact that what the Housing Production Planning Meeting is doing with the 40R, that's a green light for any developer to come in and do that, provided that it's feasible and a developer wants to do it. We talk a lot about infrastructure and things of that nature. I'll tell you right now, when it comes to sewer here in town, there is no closer guarded secret in terms of what the sewer systems are capable of, who they service, what they service. And crossing the 146 barrier is its own thing. So again, moving forward, I think that education is a very important part of the transparency. And again, getting out ahead of those things. And to close that out, the last point is, again, avoiding things where we cast blame or try to divide people in terms of this camp or that camp, or it's the state imposing this on us. That is not the case, and that does not solve our problem. We cannot shift blame to try to move away from hard decisions. Those decisions have to be made, and it requires civic engagement to be able to do so.
Shawn, that's a great segue into the last question. I think you may have already answered the question. How would you heal the divisions in our community while rebuilding trust in town government?
So recently, some of you maybe saw, I did a couple of engagements with the select board where I provided public comment. And some of those comments arguably were mostly geared towards operational budgeting and the school budget. And why I thought that was important to the community, despite the fact that only 38% of the households in town have school-aged children. But also as part of those comments, I tried to draw attention to the fact that the select board had made a deliberate stance about alienating public servants in the community's eyes. You would frequently hear people like the superintendent being lambasted, the high school principal being accused of things without any real investigation or inquiry into it, just casting their own views and their own beliefs. A police lieutenant who went through a series of interviews for a job as the police chief, was being, basically her entire service was being called into question based on the views of a few. That is not an executive branch within a community that's leading the town. And it's important to me that we understand that there is a unique relationship between them. And even though the select board doesn't get involved in the day-to-day affairs of those individual departments, again, it shapes the town's rhetoric in terms of how the rest of the community views those offices in the community. It's important that we reestablish the trust with the school system. And I understand that not everyone is here for the schools, but it is a very large part of our community. And at the end of the day, it drives the type of residents into the community that we want to be neighbors with. And reestablishing trust is important. So again, it's important to me that we move away from casting blame and shedding fault and calling people names to be able to get our point across. It's uncouth to draw inferences that our neighboring community is less adequate than our own just to make yourself seem as though you're a stronger player in the community. That's not how we handle things. That's not what I plan on doing.
So Sutton has a great opportunity in front of it. We are on a giant threshold of change. I don't think at any other point have we seen such a significant change in our leadership all at one time. Our town manager is leaving. Our town accountant is leaving as of October 4th. We have a newly hired superintendent. They've just recently hired a new high school principal. We have a new police chief who's really fitting in awesomely, and a new highway department guy. Our highway gentleman left from Millbury. We have 2 open select board seats, 2 to 3 new school committee members, as one member just resigned last night. And we're going to be getting, hopefully, a new planning board member. We have an outstanding, young, intelligent business manager at the school that has found different ways to generate revenue through rental of facilities and utilizing our buses to transport students from neighboring communities. And we also have a very young, vibrant head of HR who doesn't have an admin and handles the HR for the entire town, including the school. So simply put, the past is behind us and we can move forward. Change is fresh eyes on accounts and policies. We can look at OPEB funding. We can look at, how much money we're going to get from our TIFs and whether we're going to give any and how we're going to set up our 40R. I have a saying that my family absolutely hates. Today is yesterday's tomorrow. So the best thing that we can do at this point is everything that's gone or behind us is gone, and we're going to have to start fresh with all these new people. If we start with a clean slate, it's like starting from a zero-based budget, right? You just don't add 3% to your budget and keep going. You say, nope, we're going to wipe that Excel spreadsheet just completely clean, and let's see what falls in, because maybe where the buckets are getting filled isn't right, but no one's really looked at them that way before. So that's my simple and last answer.
So, we give you the opportunity, any last words?
The last point that I should really want to drive home is I fully intend on living in this community for the rest of my life. The future of this community is very, very important to me. My children will be raised in these schools. My family will drive on these streets. We will shop in the shops that are provided here in town. The neighbors that we allow to move into the community through residential development will become my neighbors. They will become the kids that go to the same school as mine. The goal here is not to upset the community, it's not to drive people away, but it's to understand that we're all in this together. And at the end of the day, all I want to do is be able to serve the community in the best way possible.
So, on behalf of Jen and I and the committee, we want to thank you guys for participating in this wonderful adventure. I applaud your courage for running for office. The hard work, though, it really is on the people in the audience. It would be, I would fall over and collapse if we came to town meeting in May and there's standing room only in this room. The real work is by the voter and the town member. We've got to start becoming concerned enough to take an interest in what's happening in our town. And we can't just sit on our hands. Yes, we can watch on YouTube. Yes, we can watch by Zoom and all that. That's great, but twice a year we've got to come to this room and we have to make decisions and tell the leadership that we have elected what we want to have done. And so I would urge all of you, you've got maybe 3 weeks to bring 5 to 6 friends to the town meeting with you, your friends and neighbors. The 12th? Oh! That's the reason why I'm retired. I want to thank you all for coming. We really appreciate make sure you're registered, make sure you vote, make sure you attend town meeting. Like I said, bring friends. And Jen wants to say one more thing.
Other than thank you, I just want to say, check your registration, because with the census, you might have fallen off the rolls, so, and let your friends know.
whoever you vote for, make sure you show up and are able to vote. So that's it. And thank you all for coming.